Program directors, thank you very much and good morning to everyone. The acknowledgements have been made, but I think it will also be wrong if I do not recognize the honorables that are amongst us today. We want to acknowledge the Premier in absentia. There are competing priorities that have prevented him from joining us today. Honorable Deputy Minister, it's always a pleasure. MEC, we do really appreciate, we understand you're running two portfolios, but every time we come calling on you, you've always made time for us. We really do appreciate your presence, sir. HOD, is here in front. I was going to have to look for you. Thank you. we also understand you're probably running the biggest system in the country. Gauteng Education is the biggest administration in the country. For you to sacrifice your morning and spend it with us, we do appreciate your presence. Chairman of the board, Mr. Ledimo and the entire board, we really do appreciate. You've always given us support and for your guidance and direction, urging us to hold this colloquium. We do thank you, board, very much. Saipono board member, deputy chairperson of the Saipono board, the CEO did put in an apology, is out of the country. We do acknowledge your support and we do appreciate it at every given time. Members of the Gauteng Department of Education, who are our main funders. We also have members of SGP Association in our midst, teacher unions, our partners. I think I've seen people from GIBS. Again, I'm sorry to single them out, but I have not seen any other funders with us. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would also like to acknowledge the speakers and the panelists that are with us, who have decided really to commit their morning to come and discuss the BELA Act with everyone. And indeed, we are fortunate to have them here, individually and collectively. They are celebrated luminaries in education. Professor Metcalf is an education policy expert, the first MEC of Gauteng province. So surely, I think she will know, she's the right person to be here from the policies that were put in place post-1994, what has worked, what has not worked. And I think you'll add more value in this particular discussion. We also have Advocate Merabe, who was in the task team that drafted the BELA Act. We do appreciate, and I think we will get the behind the scenes of what happened with the drafting of the bill. Dr. Matsipe, he's head of research at SATU and an associate at UJ. Thank you very much. As Mr. Ndlebe, I think we've heard you a number of times in different platforms addressing the implications of this act, both in terms of the funding that is required to make sure that it does happen, post-establishment in terms of staff that is required for this, and other implications in relation to SGPs and the likes. Not forgetting our moderator, Ms. Nompendulo Mkhaltshwa. Thank you very much. We had planned to have you, but for some reason we could not find each other. It was only yesterday that your presence was confirmed. And we thank you for gracing us with your presence and for prioritizing us and this event, taking time off your busy schedule. We do believe each one of you are bringing in valuable expertise and insights that will make our exploration of the colloquium topic a fruitful and enriching experience. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to stand before you this morning, before everyone who's gathered here, as we gather for this colloquium based on the theme, From the Understanding to Action, implementing the BELA Act for transformative change in education. The system of the country has been going radical reforms since the dawn of democracy in 1994. The government of the country was mandated to develop an integrated, non-discriminatory, and quality education and training system that will lead the country to economic growth, at the same time to redress the imbalances of the past. Legislation post-1994 sought to reverse the effect of Bantu education. As we all know, it's a law that systematically denied black children access to quality education, the required resources, and skills to excel in life. So basically what these reforms were meant for was to deal and resolve the challenges that were experienced in trying to implement an integrated, non-racial, and quality education system. Today, as we reflect on this journey, these reforms continue to serve as a cornerstone in our fight to provide every child, regardless of race, background, with an education that empowers them to achieve their fullest potential. This year marks the 22nd year of existence of the Goniwe School of Leadership. I think throughout the years, it's been our belief, rather the institution was born out of the belief of Goniwe, as the name says, we are a Goniwe School of Leadership, in his enduring belief in the power of education and leadership to transform society. So for over 2 decades, the institution has played a pivotal role in developing thought leadership within the sector, driving school improvement, as well as promoting good governance so that our young people can thrive in a democratic society. As we celebrate 30 years of democracy and 22 years of MGSLG, it is befitting that we are holding this colloquium, but that is not the only reason why we are here. Part of the reason is to demonstrate our unwavering support for the signing of the Billa Act in its entirety, in particular clauses 4 and 5, which deal with admissions, as well as language policies in schools. So as we view our democracy as a living entity, it is our collective responsibility that we nurture and strengthen it for the future generations to come. So we do want to say that at any given point, Deputy Minister and the MEC, who are the politicians in the House, whenever policy decisions have to be made, I think the best interest of the country needs to be taken at heart. And I think that's the only way we can advance the cause of society. And maybe going to why we chose this place or the significance of this particular venue. I think it was not by default. It was not a matter of 3 quotations. We're very deliberate that we wanted to come here. We're very deliberate that we wanted to come here. One, it is a site of, we know, incarceration, where at some point, former President Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi were once imprisoned in these particular premises. From that history of it being a prison, a sign of oppression, it is housing constitutional courts, which is a transformation from oppression to justice. And again, it is an educational hub. I'm sure you will have noticed people who are touring the site. So it is a center of education and a cultural center. So where exhibitions are held and programs that illuminate the South African journey to democracy. So those are some of the reasons why we decided to come to this, to the Constitutional Hill. So this not only sets a reflective tone of what we're about to deal with in this morning, but it also serves as a powerful reminder of South African historical struggles and its ongoing journey towards equality and justice. We also want to say, and why it's an opportune moment for the institution to have hosted this particular colloquium, is that we are transitioning into a higher education institution. We are trying to make sure that teachers that we train, the school governing bodies that we train, and every other stakeholders in the sector do get recognized qualifications after interacting with the school. So we view this as a platform that will open for engagement and discussions that are relevant to the current topics, and also create a space for thought leaders to come and share their expertise and knowledge. But importantly, as I've already said, is to make sure that, I think in the last few months, the only voices that we've heard are the voices that are opposing to the implementation or signing of this Billa Act in totality. And we thought that also creates a space for the progressive voices that are advocating for transformation and social justice. And at the same time, subdue the misinformation peddled by the forces that are hell-bent on hindering and frustrating educational transformation in the country. And we'll know that our hearings, I think they've been opposing sides. They've been very long as well. There's some SGP associations, obviously with the backing of the DA as a political party, and some teacher unions that do not want to relinquish some of the powers that are bestowed to SGPs, especially around admissions in schools. Whilst on the one hand, we had SATU backed by the ANC, who are advocating to give more powers to the MECs, or rather the HODs of the departments, in terms of having a final say around issues of language and admission policies in schools. But where do all of these forces emerge is at the point where they do agree that this seeks to reshape the dispensation post-1994 in terms of their rights and the successful implementation of our education policies, and making sure that every child has a fair chance. So from today's deliberation, what we seek really to achieve is we will draft a report, post this, that we wish MEC and Deputy Minister and Premier in his absence will share with the President as in terms of what do masses of our country want around clauses and 5, and them being signed into law. So as we set on this intellectual journey, colleagues, we hope that the colloquium will offer us a plethora of insights, enable fruitful and rewarding interactions, and inspire fresh perspectives about the topic at hand. I think we are also grateful to distinguished and eminent speakers and panelists for gracing us with their presence and prioritizing this occasion over any other thing. And we thank you very much. May we all be inspired, challenged, and moved into action. Thank you very much. I've also been given a task to introduce the MC of Education, Sports, Arts, and Culture, Mr. Matume Kopano Chilwane. If you may ascend, I won't say much, sir. If you may ascend the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Ne ke tshwile gore tlo etsa obituary ke phela. Ba tlo obituary rona. I'm still alive. Deputy Minister and young as well, and fit. So, thank you so much, program directors, Dr. Dempsey and Mayor Mhlahlane. Over the last man. Spedisa is monad. Spedi, I know we can argue now that Spedi is a language of love. Yes, we can argue the way she was speaking so eloquently. Deputy Minister, Dr. Makhaule, the Premier, he did submit his apology. There's an engagement which the President has requested of him. So he will be there, but he'll join us online. I don't know if he'll be able to participate, Program Director, but he says he'll be watching online because this is one area of his interest. I like to call him the champion of this. To a point where some are saying that he's got a hangover of the department. He's forgotten that he's a premier now. The chair of the board and members of the board, Matthew Goniwe, School of Governance and Leadership. Our guests, our speakers of the day, you all recognize Professor Metcalf, the first MEC of Education in Gauteng province. So 30 years down the line, it's me now. When you were in MEC, I was in primary. That's how long ago. I was in primary school when she was the MEC. A former chair of the Portfolio Committee of Higher Education. Fees must fall. Nombendu, it's good to see you again, that you are here. Ladies and gentlemen, look, the CEO has really spoken extensively about why we are here. I was even saying that this is a keynote. So he has covered all the aspects that needs to be covered. Mine is just to explain the areas that are of a challenge, that are important for us within this BELA Act. For me, DM, it's not a panacea, but it's a step. In fact, I like to say it's a step forward. Maybe 7 years ago or a decade ago, it was a correct step, a massive step. But based on the changes in the sector today, it's a step in the right direction. Now, what worries me are those that are against this. That means they are 10 years back. They are not even living in today's times. The first time I saw, I don't know how to say Maburu, Mara, so many white people gathered, except a rugby game, was on that day when they were marching. Stop the BELA. When you ask them, stop what about the BELA? Protect our schools. Which schools are those that are yours, that are private? So basically they're saying to us, we in Gauteng, and if you understand the population of Gauteng, it's quite cosmopolitan. Everybody lives with everyone. Maybe in the Free State, where's Orania, in Northern Cape? Maybe there they might create a little establishment called Orania then in the Northern Cape. But in Gauteng, you can't have an Orania here. It doesn't exist. Our kids are living together. They are playing together. So why don't they study together? They said they don't want that. In fact, DM, they said to us, they wrote a letter, say, no, we've got 18 Afrikaner schools in the province. They are going to give us 2. Say, look, let's make a deal. We're just going to give you 2, you leave our 16 alone. That's what they're saying to us. So they're adamant. And it's not the children, by the way. It's not the children. I refuse to believe that the kids don't want to study with other kids. Because ultimately they play together after school. They meet in varsity. They work together in different companies and forming businesses, wherever, post. So I refuse, it's not the children, it's the parents who don't want this. So I was counting days. I've got a chart that counts days. I believe on day 67 of 90. So there's 23 days left. Of that 23 days, I think the 14th of December, 14th of December is the last day of the 90 days that the president had given them to make representation on clause 4 and 5. The communities in Gauteng, in our province, have changed a lot. The demographics of areas where people say they've changed. An area where there used to be, for instance, only a certain set of a community. If you go to that area 30 years down the line, Prof. Metcalf, it has changed. You can go to here in Mainland, here in Pretoria, and look at the people who stay in that area, where these schools reside, Warskol, Menlo, and others. The population has changed. So now we find ourselves with kids who literally stay next door to the school, within the feeder zone, but because of the language of that school, we can't place the child there. Literally. And the argument is, let's engage, let's put facts on the table. Who stays in this community? DM. If there are more Zulus staying in that community, then we must really consider bringing Zulu into that school, whether it was an African school, medium school, or an English medium school. Those are the debates. That's where the progress and implementation we should be going to. This is where we are. So some critics don't want that. I know the official opposition in our province, they don't want that at all. The language policy, they don't want it. Admission is still a big problem. I know that in January will be marched. There will be a lot of marches to our district offices, saying, but I stay next to a school, but my child is placed 10 Ks, 15 Ks away from where we stay, but here's a school here. Big challenge. So this is really affecting us as a province. That's why when the president signed, we were amongst the first to really appreciate this, because we know the impact of this bill, especially the clause in 4 and 5. They don't want. As soon as 90 days passes, they know what's going to happen to the schools. I've got my chief director for admissions is here, Me Mule Madonsela. She's always busy. You know, she's the one DM that they say, they reported to you that she goes to school with the measuring tape. They say that we go around to every school, we go to classroom by classroom. We're measuring the size of the classroom. We're calculating the number of learners that are there and say, no, if you move the desk forward a bit, we can put another 10 kids here. So they're complaining about it. That by doing that, we're eroding the quality of education. Where they have a point, some of the critics, is the necessity and need to build schools. That one I fully agree. We need to build schools. And where I agree as well is that we should have these new schools that offer what we call vernacular as a medium of instruction, mother tongue. I agree there, that we should be building those schools. There's no argument that after so many years, 30 years into the democratic dispensation, we still don't have more than enough, or adequate, let me say that, adequate number of schools that are offering speedy and having the same quality as those that are in historically Model C schools. They I agree fully. And it's something that we must take as government, that, okay, this is a constructive, although they are raising it punitively, but we are receiving it constructively, that we should be building these schools so that we can address, because there's no language that is superior to other languages within our constitution. So those are some of the... Another one that I know that it's a big issue is the powers of these SGBs. SGB Association, I've greeted you in person. I might not have said it here. You have come yourself in person, including labor unions. I've greeted you in person. Some of your powers. We have an SGB currently. I don't know who told them they are very powerful. In one school, Prof, Pretoria girls. I don't know where they get it. Somebody's misleading them. Look, in engagement, I love an engagement. Let's have a discussion. Let's talk. Let's try to find each other. It's okay. But if you assume that as a department, we will not enforce what is prescribed within legislation, then you've got another thing coming. You've got another thing coming. So they are in the media, they've taken us to court, they're saying they're taking us to court, so it means they've got money, they're taking us to court. I don't know what they're going to achieve in court, because what I can tell you, they're going to lose in court. Because the areas, their arguments are not there. So, and obviously they are aided by some within the administration. So, these are some of the challenges that we have with some of the SGBs. And BELA addresses that aspect, that let us engage. Every issue must be informed, must be reasonable, must be of the best interest of the public, the community that we are dealing with, and more importantly, the learners at the school. Every decision. And that's what we want. In Gauteng, chair of the board, I always tell the district, the department, that we just want 5 things from our schools. We want our schools to be functional, well-disciplined, good and proper infrastructure, where learning and teaching takes place, with a comprehensive extracurricular activity. That's all. That's all we want our schools to have. Those 5 basics, then we're done. Simple, it's not difficult to ask. There's no reason, for instance, for a school to be dead. I mean, to pick up paper is not money. It doesn't need a budget. It needs a change in mindset. And that's what we want from our schools. So there's no reason to worry from anyone, especially the critics, that as Gauteng, we are out to get the Afrikaner community. Ik het nie probleme met Afrikaans. Ek het geleer Afrikaans, Deputy Chair. We're Afrikaans. So get any problem with Afrikaans. So for starting, problem with Afrikaans. I can have problem with Afrikaans. We don't have a problem with Afrikaans. It's a language, and we respect that. But we have a problem when you say our kids can't study together. We have a problem. That one I have a problem. Because we are building a nation in schools. Nations are not built after school, they're built in schools. We're building particular citizens in schools. So if you say you are going to stop us from building this nation in our schools, then that's a problem. Then we must have our kids, after so many years, arguing on racial basis, that because I'm black, or because I'm white, or because of this. That's because they've not lived together. So this is what we're addressing. And with this act, for us as Gauteng, it's a step in the right direction. There's much more that needs to be done in terms of legislation. I do feel that it could have been more explicit, but obviously as we go forward, because as a democracy, it's a living entity, as you correct, it's a living organ. We learn and then we improve on it. We could add more. So there's still areas where we'll need to improve on the legislation, especially on the Schools Act. But however, for now, with this, we should take it as a step in the right direction for transformation, for us as a province and as a country. Thank you very much. Hey, I've been given an assignment to introduce the Deputy Minister. So this is my mother in the sector. I consult here. If you want to know, where do I consult? This is where I consult Dr. Mahau. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Now we are disarming me. He has disarmed me because I disputed many of the things that he said here. I said, no, that cannot happen. He said, no, he's taping classrooms. And said, no, there's space, there's desk can push back and can create more space. I said, no, that cannot happen. So today I'm answered. Now I can see the fear, where the fear comes from, because now we are addressing the fear more than any other thing. It's a fear that most South Africans fled the country in just before 1994. They thought a monster is coming. They ran, and some are coming back. And even now, that is a fear, because when we engage in meetings, I can feel that, it's more of fear, and fear of unknown. Because in South Africa, Matumi, we have 12 official languages, and they are all protected by the Constitution. And it's our responsibility, all of us, to protect the 12 official languages. Afrikaans is a South African language. It's only spoken in South Africa. It's a responsibility only in South Africa. You can't find Afrikaans anywhere in the world. It's just like Sindebele, Xitsonga, Sesotho, which are South African languages. They are only spoken in South Africa, and it's the responsibility of the government of South Africa to protect. Program directors, greetings to you, Mekethi and Dr. Noge. The Premier, because he confirmed he even has a chair, I put my back on his chair, but when the higher power calls, we have no choice. We just have to run. Honorable MEC of Education, Art, and Culture and Recreation, Honorable Matume Chilwane, Professor Mary Metcalf, Prof, it's always good to be in your midst. We feel like we're mothered. And when you speak, we all feel comfortable that a mother is speaking, and we need just to run with it. We really appreciate. Matthew Goniwe, School of Leadership and Governance, Chairperson of the board, and all board members that are present today here, the CEO, SATU, researcher, Dr. David Matsipe, our Chief Director from the Department of Basic Education, representatives from public entities, representatives from labor organizations, SGP associations, other officials from both Basic Education and Gauteng Department of Education, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, Sanbonan. Thank you for your attention as we explore a significant milestone in South African education, the Basic Education Law Amendment Act, BELA Act. It's no longer a bill. I saw one of the things they put a bill. We don't have a bill, we have an act. This act is the cornerstone of our ongoing efforts to ensure equitable, inclusive, and transformative education in South Africa. The BELA Act represents a legislative journey spanning between 3 administrations, which means it started from the 4th, 5th, 6th administration when it was passed by Parliament. But on 10 January 2022, the former Minister of Basic Education, Meeji Motshekga, officially introduced the draft to Parliament. This moment marked a critical step forward in an extended process of legislation reform aimed at addressing enduring administrative challenges and advancing the transformation agenda within our education system. The Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, Act 32 of 2024, amends critical sections of the South African Schools Act of 1996. It serves as a response to contemporary challenges faced by South African schools, aligning with evolving needs of our communities and the imperatives of case law. Among the significant provisions introduced by this act are, when I say case law, it means we've been to court to and fro, and the courts identified the gap, and the BELA Act was closing those gaps that were identified by the courts. It's not a thumbsuck that somebody just woke up and say, now I'm amending the Structures Act. All the court cases were tested, and to see that there is a gap in your legislative reforms as education. So you need to go and close those gaps. And we cannot have a system that is run by courts. So whatever the courts have identified, we need to close the gap. So, and another thing, our constitution, it gives compulsory education in South Africa from grade 1 up to grade 9. When you speak of compulsory education, it starts from grade 1 and grade 9. And since, for more than 20 years, our children are attending grade R. And there was no legislation that speaks to grade R, and there's no budget for the grade R learners. So we saw another gap that, that's why this act was introduced to cover the introduction of grade R, the regulation of learner attendance, revised code of conduct for learners, provision for homeschooling, rationalization of schools, abolition of corporal punishment and initiations, language and admission policy reform, criminalization of school disruptions. Same as corporal punishment, it's unlawful, but there was no law that is enforcing it to be illegal. So that's why most schools, they continued to apply corporal punishment. And now there's no law. So this BELA Act is going to criminalize it. One of the most notable changes involves granting the head of department authority to intervene in the development of the language and admission policies in the schools. That's why many of our partners are not happy with this. But if there's no school in the province, the first door we knock at is the door of the HOD and the MEC. They provide for a school. So why would they not be part of the admission policy? Because when children are not admitted at a school, they come to the department. Even in Gauteng, if they come to MEC Chilwane, if it looks like they don't hear him or he doesn't listen to them, they come to DBE. Mr. Ndlebe always knows, we say, Mr. Ndlebe, go to Gauteng. Go, I want a positive answer. Always when he comes, he will come with a positive answer. Whether it's Western Cape, because we have a challenge of these two provinces, Western Cape and Gauteng. They are the economic hub of our country, South Africa. So most people would want to move to places where there's economic activity. No one will want to stay in the rural areas when there's nothing. That's why people are moving to Gauteng. Now he's crying. By right, he needs to build 60 schools to accommodate the new learners, the grade 1 and the grade 8, and those whose parents have found employment in Gauteng. And the same as Western Cape. Every year, beginning of the year, we are faced with that challenge that, hey, how far are you with the placement of learners? How far are you? Because their parents are there. And we cannot say send the children back to the rural villages. When we tried to close the gap of building schools, we built schools in the rural villages. Then, when we started in 1994, we built many schools, state-of-the-art schools. Now they are white elephant because the economic active people have moved with their children. Now the schools are empty. Now we have a new challenge in the metros, in the cities, and in towns, because everyone wants to stay closer to the working place. That's why there's a change in the demography of our people. Where it used to stay a particular race, now is integration. We're integrated, we live together. And we need to accept that, because that is the democracy that we ushered in 1994 in our country, South Africa. So the intervention by the HOD does not aim to diminish the role of the school governing bodies, but to ensure that these policies align with the national legislation as well as the constitutional principles. So the BELA Act aims to enhance access to education by removing barriers that prevent learners from being admitted to schools based on race, color, religion, scholastic ability, or sporting talent. Provincial education departments are now empowered to enforce compliance with the Constitution and other relevant legislation, ensuring that no learner is denied access to education or on discriminatory grounds. Beyond facilitation access, the BELA Act also prioritizes learners' retention. Mechanisms are introduced to monitor attendance, eliminate disruptions, and uphold stability in the schooling environment. This holistic approach underscores the commitment to creating an inclusive and equitable education system that serves all South African learners. This act is not a weapon that we are fighting. There will be no winner, no loser. It strengthens the social cohesion and the transformation agenda of our country. So in addition to addressing access, the BELA Act seeks to improve governance within schools. It mandates school governing bodies to actively consult parents on critical matters such as code of conduct and financial decisions. This requirement fosters transparency, strengthens accountability, and ensures that the voices of parents and guardians form integral part to school management. The Act reflects a shift towards participatory governance, which is essential for fostering trust and collaboration between schools and their communities. The mandate of the HOD to intervene is rooted in ensuring compliance with the law rather than stripping the SGPs of their legitimate authority. School governing bodies play a pivotal role in determining school policies. However, in a democratic and sovereign state like South Africa, we need to work together in an integrated manner. Public schools are, as institutions serving diverse communities, must reflect the constitutional value of equality and non-discrimination. Unlimited powers and/or unchecked powers could subject the sector to courts on daily basis. Instead, SGPs should be overseers that the implemented legislations are applied accordingly for the interest of learners. Because we have the education because of a learner and nothing else, because of building the future of the country and nothing less or more. Critically, Section 30 and 31 of the Constitution affirms that cultural and linguistic rights must be exercised in ways that promote inclusivity and do not marginalize minority groups. While these provisions protect diversity, they also compel us to address inequalities that persist in the education system. As we speak right now, the team from Education and Higher Education and Culture are gathered there in the Emperor's Palace. We remember in February, Minister Motshekga announced that from next year, grade 4 will introduce the mother tongue teaching in grade 4, because we learn other languages using our mother tongue. So every mother tongue is allowed. If there are 35 learners in a school who speak a particular language, the government is forced to appoint teachers to teach those children in their language. So, and we don't discriminate against any other language, any language in South Africa. If there are 35 learners who are in that school, the government will appoint teachers. 3 decades into South Africa's democracy, many schools still reflect divisions along racial, ethnic, and linguistic lines. I always make an example, Honorable MEC, about Marikana. Marikana originally is Tswana speaking, but because of the mining activities in Marikana, now there are more Xhosas than Setswana speaking people. So you cannot stay in the past and say, no, this is a Tswana school. It's a Setswana school. You cannot allow Xhosa. Now, the people, the Xhosa people have moved to Marikana. We must give them a school. We must give them a class. If we have a school and they are just 35 or 50, we must give them a class in that school. So there's no way we will going to lock them out and say, no, this is a Setswana speaking school. Things are changing in South Africa. So the language and admission policies have at times been manipulated to exclude learners based on race, socioeconomic status, or other factors. Mother tongue education is underpinned in the Constitution effect because it becomes a reality for every South African learner. I know that some of us some of us like me, we want our children to speak English. I don't want my children to be taught in my language. Ngoba if they are taught in my language, it's a bit, what is it? Inferior. And that child will look like stupid. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, what makes this notion that our children at the age 10, grade 4, cannot read with understanding is because we introduce English at grade 4. Now this English is foreign, they meet it for the first time, now we test them on that English. And competing with the international learners whose mother tongue is English. and they will ask you about that animal that I've never seen. Zubi, what is that animal? Octopus. I've never seen an octopus. Now my grade 4 child is asked about the behavior of the octopus. What causes the octopus to behave like this? Then when they fail to answer that question, they read, because they read fluently, but they can't understand because they don't even know what an octopus is. But if you ask them, like in my language, Siswati, I say, lishongololo, lihlala esihlahleni, ungalitsinza, liyagoqana. You understand lo mntwana. But if you tell that child in English that he just encountered it in that year, it's a challenge. So transformation in education is neither simple nor uncontested. However, it is essential. The BELA Act further seeks to dismantle barriers to access and create equitable educational opportunities across all forms of schooling, whether public or independent or home-based, by aligning education laws with constitutional principles enshrined in our constitution. South Africa belongs to all who live it, black and white and all this, you know that. Transformation is challenging, but its success is vital for building a more inclusive and prosperous South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the BELA Act embodies the next step, the next phase in the transformation of the education system in South Africa. Its implementation demands vigilance and a firm resolve to confront inequalities that undermine the democratic values upon which our nation was founded. Together, as custodians of the education system in the country, let us embrace the difficult but necessary work of transformation to secure a better future for all our children in South Africa. It cannot happen that Madumi will just come today and say, tomorrow I'm closing this school, or I'm changing the language policy. He can't do that. Even if he wants to, he must allow the prevailing circumstances to take precedence. Thank you so much.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our Deputy Minister. I told you that we lined up the best of the best, and I guess we are enriched and we are learning. And we have heard from the CEO, then after the CEO it was the MEC, and also I was highly impressed by the MEC with the articulation in Afrikaans, because when I try, I talk Tsotsital. Thank you, MEC. You showed your expertise in Afrikaans. And the minister, Deputy Minister, was also on point and straight to the brief that he was given. And now we are clearly aligned to the theme of today, that is from understanding to action. And we now understand better. And let's give all our speakers a round of applause, because in understanding, we are able to act appropriately. At this point, I'll give my co-program director an opportunity to give us what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nohe. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick 10-minute leg stretch. We are in the education sector today, so if there's one thing the sector does well, it's time and making sure that everything goes according to time. So I know you tell educators 10 minutes, it means exactly that. We're going to give 10 minutes for our panelists to get ready. midday, so it is still good morning, but by the time that we wrap up the program, it'll be afternoon, so I'm taking liberties. Let me apologize for restarting our program late. I was the first one who made you commit to 10 minutes. So I'm standing here with a bit of egg on my face. I apologize profusely. We had some technical gremlins that we had to get out of the way. Our panel discussion is going to be facilitated by a very capable activist. How else do you describe her? I want to say former parliamentarian, but I feel like that doesn't capture the essence of who she is. So she's going to be coming onto stage shortly to get us into that panel discussion. I did say please make sure that you're ready for an open engagement with our panelists as well, because they really have put together a very strong panel to discuss the various aspects of BELA Act. Before we get into that, Dr. Nohe is just going to run through some acknowledgements for us, and then we'll continue. Today's session is a hybrid session. Important for me to announce that for those that are joining us online, unfortunately our chat box is down. So you won't be able to contribute to the conversation. You won't be able to ask questions, but we very much still invite you to stay tuned as the conversation continues. Dr. Nohe, over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Without wasting time, I wish to acknowledge the following organization, the JET, and also acknowledge JASA, Junior Achievement South Africa, and also acknowledge Allen and Gail Gray Foundation, and also take the opportunity to acknowledge the Center for Emerging Researchers, the CER, and also amongst us we've got the South African Principals Association, SAPA. Thank you so much. You are all being acknowledged. And at this point, I would like to call upon on stage Ms. Nompendulo Mkachwa, who will be the moderator for the panel session. And she needs no introduction, but currently she's a spokesperson for the Ministry in the Presidency for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. But her CV is very long. I don't want to waste time. Thank you so much. Over to you, Nompendulo.
All right, I don't know if the mic that I'm mic'd with is working yet. Hello? Okay, I'm gonna use this one. I'm gonna use the hand mic for now, and the team at the back will let us know when we're ready for our mics that have been, I don't know what they called, masihleli la. Le mic le hleli la. Angazi ukuthi ibizwani. Sanibonani, dumelang. My name is Nompendulo Mkachwa. Before I was even a member of parliament, I had the honor of being a non-executive director of the Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance. And so it's really great to be back here. In his absentia, I want to really thank Premier Panyaza Lusufi, the then MEC of Education, for seeing confidence in myself. I think I was probably 24 when I was a board member or a non-executive director. And that just is testament to how much confidence Premier Panyaza Lusufi has in young people. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone who identifies in between, today we're gathered for this very important conversation under the theme, From Understanding to Action, Implementing the BELA Act for Transformative Change in Education. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge the presence of Deputy Minister Reginam Haule, the presence of MEC Chilwane. He was saying that when he was in primary school, Prof. Mary was the MEC, I wonder how old I was when she was the MEC. Crash or something like that. So greetings to you, MEC, to the CEO and the chair of the board and all board members that are here. Education is a highly contested terrain. From the times of Hitler, when he used education to push his own propaganda, creating a thought and an idea that there's some Aryan race, because you've got blue eyes, Ms. Constantindes, you are better or smarter than me, apparently, and blonde hair. And then it went on to the times of Verwoerd, where in this country, a young girl like me would never have thought of being a member of parliament at the age of 25, let alone chairing a portfolio committee at the age of 27. And so it is without doubt that even now, when we're trying to move this education system to be more transformative, to deal with the inequities of our past, and to really move us to the type of future that we want, it is said that young people on the African continent will be the dominant global population in 2050. We need an education that is going to make sure that by 2050, as the dominant population, we are ready to lead this, not the country, not the continent, but the world. And so education will always be a contested terrain, but we need to, out of the conversation we're going to be having today, find some sort of middle ground where we commit ourselves as different stakeholders to ensuring that our own personal interests don't get in the way of what we as a collective, as a nation, ought to be building. To take us into this very important conversation, I'd like to welcome the panelists, Prof. Mary Metcalf. I don't think she needs any introduction if she can make her way to the stage. A distinguished education policy expert and advocate for inclusive education. I'd like to welcome Dr. David Matsipe. We can give her a round of applause. Dr. David Matsipe, Head of Research at SATU and a leading voice for educators. I'd like to also welcome Mr. James Ndlebe. We can give him a round of applause. I'd like to welcome Mr. James Ndlebe. He's the Chief Director at the Department of Basic Education. He's the Chief Director at the Department of Basic Education, who has been instrumental in drafting and implementing education policies. Lastly, but definitely not least, I'd like to welcome Advocate Jeremiah Merabe, a key contributor to drafting the BELA Act. In fact, he was in the task team, who has a wealth of knowledge on its legal context. Advocate Merabe. All right, so this is our amazing panelist. We know that there are people who are following this conversation online. I know that there was a request online that you send some of your questions on a WhatsApp number that was sent. So we will refer to some of the questions that were there. Unozip was on standby to share those questions with us. I would like to do things a little bit differently. And here I'm really throwing a curveball to the panelists, because I really thought about it about a minute before I came up on stage. I'd like to, and if the technical team can get 2 mics ready or a mic ready, please. I'd like to start by acknowledging one hand on this side and one hand on this side. And can we please make sure that we're gender inclusive? That can just share that as they sit in this room right now, what is one of the greatest concerns or one of the greatest thoughts that linger in their minds about the BELA Act? Can I note one hand on this side, please? There's a gentleman who has a water bottle. Can we note him? And this side, please. The lady with Itugu, with the blue jacket. Can we have the mic go to the gentleman with the water bottle, sir? Just what is on your mind as we enter this conversation?
Thanks, Chair. So I think for me, the greatest point, my name is Philip Hlachwayo. I work for an organization called Click Learning. I'm an education specialist. So I think one of the biggest thought that I'm grappling with is how we have viewed the inclusion of one group as an exclusion of another. And I say this because in inclusive education, we don't use words like substitution. So when we include people, we don't exclude others. But I think connected to that thought is the idea that when we eventually implement the BELA Act, I think the greatest concern that I have is how do we guard learners and parents from exclusionary practices once they enter spaces that we are opening access to. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there are policies like BE where there's inclusion of black people in predominantly white companies, but once they get into those companies, there are exclusionary practices that exist in those companies that prevent them from thriving and being successful in those spaces. So how do we then use the same approach to deal with education, the education space?
All right, thank you so much for that. Exclusion versus inclusion. Yes, ma'am? The lady with the, yes.
The lady with the duke.
The lady with the duke.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Murorisheng Mapula. I'm the CFO at JET Education Services. So my thoughts right now are not too far from what the gentleman said, but as I'm welcoming and really celebrating the implementation of home language in schools, I mean, it's exciting, just thinking back where I come from and what I studied and thinking, how could I have performed way better than I have had I been taught in my language? But I'm thinking further from there to say, what are we doing? And we, the government, the non-profit, NGOs, as well as the business, to make sure that in 8 years' time, when these grade 4s go to write National Senior Certificate, the systems are ready to have them be able to write in their mother tongue. How do we ready the curriculum to make sure that these technical subjects and courses that we've had to do in English are available in our home language? And further to this, is that what's going to happen in the university and TVET sectors? Are we bringing them in? Are we also making sure that they are ready to absorb a Zulu and a Pedi coming into the institutions? And further on, obviously, into the world of work, we have got to have a system together, a process that starts today to make sure that all is ready to welcome them whenever their time comes. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for those two thoughts as we enter. The lady in the pink, you'll catch us when we're done with our panel. I just needed our panel to get a sense of the mood in the room as we start our conversation. Singafiki la sicabanga ukuthi sina sazi yonke into sipha abantu izinto abangafuna ukuzizwa. So we got a sense. I know it's just two hands, but it sets the tone. We're about to have more engagements, and the one thing that's so important for me is that our country gives us the right to express ourselves. And it also imposes on us the responsibility of doing so in a fair manner. So as we enter robust discussions later on, I just want to implore on the House to make sure that we maintain the decorum of abantu abadala nabancane. Mina angazi ngimncane or ngimdala. Mangiyevets ngimdala. Kodwa mangilana nabo mam Regina ngimncane. So, but please let's just make sure that we maintain a decorum that can allow us to be able to move together after the discussions that we've had. We're going to start with Prof. Mary. You've heard the colleague speak about, that fine line between being inclusive and others feeling that when we're being inclusive, we're now becoming exclusive. And that's a conversation that always comes up when we speak about transformation. You've been in the education system for a very long time. You know where we've come from, and we're here now. Can you just take us through your thoughts in that journey to where to the point at which we even got to the BELA bill, which is now an act?
Yeah, now it's working. I love that you've started with the inclusion, exclusion. I think it's a very good place to start. And I want to preface my response by saying, in the time that I have, and with all the points I want to make, I hope I'm going to provoke debate. And I hope that in the debate, I have an opportunity to learn and to change my mind. So the inclusion, exclusion thing is both technical and a feeling. And it's interesting because I would say that for many in this audience, when we say exclusion, it invokes a history of racial exclusion and a desire to combat that. But where I'm going to go in my opening comments is, are there ways in which others now feel excluded? And what's our responsibility to minimize that as part of a journey? And why I say it is because, I've spoken a lot on BELA. And for a long time, I think I was missing the point. Because all of my explanations were technical and legalistic. And I kept being puzzled about the mobilization around BELA, because technically and legally, that doesn't hold water. Until I realized that actually it's not the technical issues, and we can come back to that. It's about the emotions that it invokes and how that is used for mobilization. So the first, maybe controversial, but I don't think so, point that I want to make is the reason that I think I missed it is because I'm white. I don't have the same deep ancestral historical experience of exclusion, disempowerment, dispossession, so I miss the emotion. So that's a journey for me to grow in my own understanding, and I'll never stop learning. But if we now look at what it is that BELA does and how it relates both to the language question that was asked and to the exclusion question, is that I think in this BELA journey, we have to acknowledge the wisdom of Dikgang Maseneki. So Dikgang Maseneki was presented at the Constitutional Court with a problem. And the problem was that for the case of Ermelo, the Mpumalanga Department of Education, and I'm going to make it sharp and perhaps unfair, wielded their power as the department to say, you will change your language policy, and if you don't change your language policy, this is what we're going to do. We're removing the school governing body. You know what? In the lower courts, they lost. The lower court said, school governing body has the right. That went to Constitutional Court. Dikgang didn't say this is a legal issue. He said it's an issue of justice. I'm not only going to look that the department was incorrect. I'm going to be looking at broader questions of justice. So he asserts everybody has a right in the Constitution to learn in the language of choice, including Afrikaans. He asserts the rights of the school governing body. And by the way, BELA just takes all of the rulings and turns it into a very careful process. So everyone is protected by process. But he also did something profound. Okay, the department's wrong, must do better. But he said to the school governing body, you have a responsibility to think of community and the rights in the Constitution more broadly than your narrow notion of community. You have to broaden your sense of community to defend the rights of everyone for a public space, be taught in the language of choice. I'm telling you, it's easy to Google. If you've got access to Google, you must read the judgment because it's so instructive. So what does that mean for us as we move from understanding to action. And I want to say that this is an opportunity for leadership. Political leadership, leadership from officials at every level. And what is the leadership that we require? It's a leadership that builds a sense of belonging of everyone in our society. It's not an opportunity to say we've beaten you, but we hear your concerns. We want to develop strategies to ensure that the implementation and action of BELA builds an inclusive society in which people feel they belong and in which they feel that their fears are heard. So what we're seeing is mobilization that's factually incorrect, which builds on people's fears and anxieties. Our responsibility is to understand those fears and anxieties and to lead in a way in which we take everyone forward in a society which includes everyone. So MEC, I think this requires particular challenges. I loved your speech because I think you helped me understand and put the pieces together, the particular challenges of Gauteng. I know about your space challenges, I know about the linguistic complexity, but I hadn't seen how profoundly they come together. So thank you for that. I think that was very important. But what our responsibility then, as we move to implementation as the GDE, is number one, to win back the people that are scared, away from those that seek to mobilize them for their own political purposes. Number one, by ensuring that these schools work as places where there's different languages. That requires resources, number one. The second thing is that it also requires that we have a deeper understanding and processes of dealing with underlying unrecognized racism. So when I say this, often people misunderstand. Please don't understand. I will never say I'm not a racist, because I and every other person in this room has to spend their life combating prejudice. It's reinforced in the way we live, where we live, who's on the street, who has jobs, who doesn't jobs. We have to see all schools in a journey, and I think the Department of Education, especially as we take forward this new attempt at social cohesion, we have to put into place careful processes of deepening, not a I'm not a racist defensiveness, but a deeper understanding of the ways in which racism manifests. So the actions that we need taking forward, healing the divisions of the past, addressing the inequities of the past, understanding that those are still with us, building a sense of belonging. Thank you for letting me speak for so long.
Hello? All right, there we go. Thank you so much to Prof. Mary. The issue on fear, Deputy Minister Mhaule mentioned it earlier on. She said when you get into the room and you speak to colleagues and you speak to stakeholders, there's a sense of understanding and agreement on where we should be going. So the fear is what really is what drives the emotion on how different collectives within the education system respond. Chief Director, there's fear amongst educators. Colleagues from SATU, Mr. Matsepe, there's fear from educators. There's perhaps fear from yourselves as the leadership, the resources that are going to be needed to try and drive this very transformative decision that we've taken. There's fear from those who believe their religious beliefs might be contested, those who believe their language might be eradicated, those who question their capacity to deliver on what this progressive act is speaking to. So many of us are sitting here with a sense of fear. Dr. Matsipem, as someone who represents educators, can you share with us what the sense of, from educators, what the pros and the cons are in terms of the BELA Act as it stands? And then later on, you can also reflect on what you think we should be doing as a collective. The lady in the Duke said earlier on, it is our collective responsibility to make sure that this act is a success. So what do you think could be the different interventions brought forth by this network to ensure that educators are able to meet the demands of the act as it stands? I don't know if your mic is working. Okay, you have a mic. I think it's working. Just try again.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to every one of you. I'm not going to make a formal acknowledgement, but safe to say I wish to acknowledge Deputy Minister, MEC, Premier in absentia, my peers, but in another cap, which is chairperson of the board and the entire board members, all protocol observed. So I have been mandated by the glorious movement called SATU. This implies that everything that I'm going to be saying here is collective, because at SATU we observe the principle of democratic centralism. So let me just share our position in trying to respond to these questions. I'm going to envelope everything in my response. So let me first foreground my response by talking to language issue, admission, language policy, admission policy, making grade R compulsory, and then I will get into the challenges that we may face or we are facing as we speak. And then I will go forward. I will go and make a way forward on how to take moving forward. As an organization, the changes that we have been looking for in terms of admission policies, as I was saying, and around the language policy, where we believe strongly as an organization that we need to integrate and de-racialize our schools. We also believe that the HOD has the role to play in making sure that in this country, no language can be used to discriminate against other learners in our schools. And we're absolutely happy that finally this is happening in our lifetimes, where we can be able to respect our languages and our culture in our schools. We believe that in terms of the law of the country, this act mediates respect amongst the different cultures, spiritualities, including religions. For us as an organization, we shouldn't see ourselves as a group of people that cannot live together, meaning that unity is sacrosanct from our side. We also appreciate the fact that this act mediates the issue of grade R as a compulsory, in that no nation can really be successful in building an inclusive economy unless you build a very strong foundation for your children. Even when you build a particular house, you must make sure that your foundation is very strong to avoid disaster in future. We believe that registering grade R child at the age of 4 will really assist our country to deal with functional skills and sharpening the skills of our children at the early age. And by so doing, we can make an impact on reducing unemployment and crime in our beloved country, South Africa. We spent almost 10 years in back and forth public participation within the very same act. But now that there are those two clauses, which is 4 and 5, there have been a president has freezed these clauses. So why these detractors are they fearful? So the resistance to educational transformation by some of African-speaking people can be attributed to several factors. One, cultural preservation. This implies that many African-speaking people see the education system as a means to preserve their language, culture, and heritage. Changes in the curriculum or language policies that prioritize their languages or culture can be perceived as a threat to their identity. This thinking is based on colonial and apartheid pillars which used education to oppress, suppress, degrade, and destroy the identity of an African child. It must crush because it's not fear they have, but domination they have enjoyed. 2, historical privilege. During apartheid, Afrikaans-speaking people benefited from a system that provided them with superior educational resources and opportunities. The transformation efforts aimed at redressing past inequalities can be seen as a loss of this historical privilege. For 30 years of democracy, Africans have tried to accommodate African-speaking world, but what did they do? Refused land redistribution and blocked black children from so-called African schools against the same constitution they claim they respect. Thirdly, fear of decline in quality. Important, there is a concern among some of African-speaking people that transforming the education system to more inclusive might lead to a decline in the quality of education. This fear is often rooted in the belief that the existing system which favored them was of higher quality. This is white supremacy in action. Anything by white is good and quality. This is nonsensical. They believe that in the doctrine of separation of power, separation of equality, the same system of homelands they favored is nothing of, is advancing of racism, and this must be dealt with. Fourthly, political and economic power. Education is not neutral. Why am I saying this? Education is closely linked to political and economic power. Some Afrikaners may resist transformation efforts because they fear losing their influence and control over these spheres. They know very well that when Africans can use their mother tongue, they will discover their identity and wealth. This means Africans must stop praying this racist. So lastly, resistance to change. Change can be inherently challenging, and there is often a resistance to altering established systems and norms. This resistance can be amplified when the changes are perceived as being imposed by external forces or as undermining long-standing traditions. Therefore, it is within these backdrops that it is our wish as an organization that BELA Act must dismantle this racism attitude. In conclusion, we therefore making a clearing call to President to unfreeze these outstanding clauses in the BELA bill. So one other thing is that since the grade R is compulsory and it has been taken to the mainstream of basic education. So the departments must make sure that there is sufficient funding to reskill the existing personnel and also to employ some extra educators. And also they must make sure that there is sufficient fund to make sure that they build extra infrastructure in terms of classrooms, such that those people, they can be properly accommodated. With those words, I rest my case. Thank you very much.
To the technical team, thank you so much, Dr. Matsipe. I literally have 3 mics in my hands, and like when I try and test them, because you know, as a moderator, I feel really incapacitated right now. I can't stop someone. I can't say, so profound, you know? I can't do any of that. So can colleagues please help us so that I'm not being paid, but I must do my job properly. Hello? 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 Hello?
1, 2, 1, 2.
All right, we'll just stay here for now.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Matsepe, for those reflections. Dr. Matsepe says it's not fear, it's the privilege of dominance. You're so used to dominating. So whilst Prof. Mary says, I acknowledge my privilege for not having the same emotional, historic understanding of a pain of exclusion. He says, on the other hand, there are others who don't have that same appreciation. Babundlebe, given the concerns that Dr. Matsepe has raised, and I think the lady in the Duke also spoke to it a bit. It was my name for how many years? For like 3 years, and then I even had to cut my hair, and then people are still calling me the lady in the Duke. Nompendulo, the lady in the Duke. I had so many names. Fees must fall. And my parents gave me such a beautiful name, Nompendulo. But nonetheless, there is this concern around the capacity of government in particular to be able to implement this act. I mean, there are questions around our fiscal capacity, there are questions around the LTSM, the logistics, the personnel, with, you know, the fact that now grade R is legally part of the basic education system. Do we have that capacity? I think there's a number of fears. And I also think, as a young person, I am an activist. I might work for government, but I am an activist. I think it's okay for government to admit that it is also scared. So that when we take citizens along, when we speak about a social compact, President Ramaphosa urges this entire country to work on a social compact where we see private and public sector coming together. I think it's impossible for us to see responsible, active citizens when we as government are not able to take them along on the limitations that we have. Premier Lesufi said during elections that so they questioned him about, you know, the job opportunities he was creating for young people. And he said sometimes the most progressive decisions don't seem like the most responsible. And so we would like to hear from yourself as the department, how are you going about navigating some of the challenges that may come as the custodians of this act who are responsible for ensuring its implementation?
Thank you very much, Program Director. Greetings to the DM, MEC, HOD, and all the dignitaries and the panelists around. There are slogans that we sing as a country. Slogans like, we are a rainbow nation, we are a constitutional democracy, leave no child behind, education is a societal issue. These are very famous slogans that when we try and put them in a law, then they become challenged. 12 languages with all equal rights, put them in a law, then you get opposition. When you say our children are studying schooling very late, they need to start a little bit early, then you've got a challenge. How do you want to do that? You don't even have money to educate those children. Therefore, don't put that law in. The slogans continue that we must have a free and compulsory education. And then when you make compulsory education, you have to ensure that those who disrupt education then get prosecuted. And you are told you are very harsh and unfair. When you say parents have the right to ensure that children are at school until they turn the age of grade 9 or 14, then you are told other stories that you are interfering with the rights of the parents to raise children. But at the same time, you are saying education is compulsory. How do you make it compulsory if you are not taking people to task for not taking children to school? So everything that you find inside the BELA Act, it's a response to that. Now we're saying our children need to start at grade R to catch up, so that by the time they write these international tests, at least they are matured, they are ready, they have been taken through. And actually, we are very late to take them to school at about the age of 5. Other countries like Chinese take their children to school at the age of 3. Now we need to make a start. Then when we make a start, we then put a price tag and say it's not affordable. You don't even have money to do that. Why do we need to put a price tag for the education of the children if we're saying education is an apex priority? If it's an apex priority, it means all the resources must be prioritized and be directed to education in order to meet this apex priority. So instead of asking us, where do you get the money from? Do you have money? Yes, the department doesn't generate money. The department gets funded by Treasury. And when we put a law into the system, like the BELA Act, we are asked to do what is called CS. It is a system by which government asks us whether we have done the social impact and the funding required. And in the past 10 years, yes, we did that assessment. And we had put a very big figure there of how much it will cost us to run grade R. 10 years down the line, that figure is nowhere, it's nothing. Because where you're sitting now, you know the primary school to where you live as grade R. So that money is no longer necessary, because grade R is being offered in schools as we speak. The Department of Basic Education is busy producing these booklets for the children to learn. The department is currently building those playgrounds for those schools. So grade R is happening. It's not like the Act is going to introduce grade R from zero. It's there. It is there even in schools. It is there even in communities, because there are community centers that are educating these children. So what are we doing as a department? We're trying to ensure that wherever there are 4- and 5-year-olds, these children are exposed to a curriculum, and that they are not being babysitted because they have to wait for the parents to come back from home. So we're saying we're not asking all the centers that are running grade R to close down. and bring children to our public schools. We're not saying that. We're saying wherever they are, expose these children to a curriculum that prepares them for grade 1. And all we need to do is to ensure that that happens. That is the role of the department. That if you are a makulu somewhere, you have these 4 or 5 year olds in your garage, it's not for you to babysit them and feed them. It's for you to expose them to a curriculum so that everybody who is 4 to 5 has a connection. By the way, Mule, there are people with placards in your office from the ECD center, because it looks like we're saying close them down. We're not closing them down. They will continue, but we have to monitor them as a department to ensure that these children are receiving education. So that is the issue with grade R. And how do you then make sure grade R gets full funding? LTSM, school nutrition, scholar transport, especially in rural areas. These kids were excluded from those processes because there was no law that allows for their funding. And you can not ask Treasury to fund this thing outside the law, because Treasury needs to look at the program and look at the law and then put funding for those programs. So the BELA Act is the beginning that says, Minister of Finance, when you give us a budget speech, remember there's a law, and that law now includes grade R, and therefore start budgeting this. And it is Parliament that does the budgeting. It's Parliament that shifts funds according to priorities. So if there is a shortage of money in the country, it's not because we're introducing grade R, it's because there's a shortage of money for everybody and all grades, and therefore government might prioritize. My experience is that government always finds money where there's a need. And we want to believe that they will find money to run this grade R. So what is the department's expectation now? We're not going to dismantle the systems that are currently running in the department. We're not going to destabilize the sector. We're going to allow grade R to continue wherever they are and allow them to be placed in schools where possible, and allow those community centers that are doing well to continue running with grade R under our supervision. We're going to ensure that we follow the rules and regulations that come from the Department of Higher Education. If you have heard of Mr. Tech, that is the minimum requirement for teacher qualification. Because Mr. Tech says children need to be taught by qualified people. And those qualified people need to have a B.Ed degree of foundation phase. That a grade R teacher must be a qualified foundation phase teacher. We're not going to get those teachers, all of them, by tomorrow. There needs to be a process to phase these things in slowly until we get universal integration of grade R in our schools and in all communities. We have done that. Most of you were taught by teachers who had grade 12. It changed. We have teachers that were trained for 2 years. We never retrenched those teachers. We left them in the system and allowed them to grow. Now all teachers have degrees. So we're not going to say those teachers that are teaching grade R next year, you're done, forget about you, you're gone. Now there are processes that you need to look at. The post basket are determined by the number of learners in a school. The school receive a budget on the basis of the number of learners. Those are equitable shares that government follow. Now, if we say we're going to introduce grade R completely in 2025, we are wrong, it's too late, because the post baskets have been determined closed. Mule has closed the admission processes already. We now know which children are going where. It's too late. So it means we need to start building it afresh, that in 2026, when we do the post basket in September, we already know that for 40 children, you need a teacher. You build it in. That's how the budget works in this country. And that is the process that we are all engaged in the department to ensure that the BELA Act gets funded. And at the moment, even with little funding, grade R will continue to receive education. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chief Director Ndlebe. So, Mr. Ndlebe, it seems as though there are people who don't know what you are saying. For the mere fact that there are so many understandings and narrations of what the Act actually seeks to do, it means that we've missed one another. And what I would appreciate is that we've gathered this colloquium here so that people can learn, so that we can learn from one another, so that we can get clarities on the things we're concerned about, so that we can raise the issues that we are concerned about. And so I will expect a high level of discipline, particularly for this panel. Because this is, Mr. Ndlebe, mina, if bengahlala naye, isikhathi eside ngilokhu ngimbuza izinto eziningi that I'm seeing and hearing citizens, educators, parents concerned about. So we're going to have to make sure that we listen to one another. Those of you who I'm sure are having reflections amongst yourselves as the panelists share, please try and leave those reflections to after our colloquium. I think Sylvia is arranging food for us. So we're going to have food, we're going to be able to discuss. I hope our panelists and other leaders in the sector won't dash off. I hope you don't have commitments, so that we can continue having these conversations and clarify one another on areas where we're not sure. So, Mr. Ndlebe, what are we doing to make sure, I'm assuming the colloquium, Mr. Mahlangu, is part of our efforts to bring everyone on the same page. We're quite few in the room, which also speaks to budget issues. So what other means do we have in place to try and disseminate this information so that we don't have these different understandings of what the Act seeks to achieve? Back to you, Mr. Ndlebe.
I think the first step was to have you sitting here and have these television cameras going around. that was one of the many areas. I think the Department of Basic Education have one of the greatest paparazzis you can ever get in every government department. I'm not saying anything about you, but I'm saying the paparazzis in the Basic Education Department are on top of the game. My office in particular works very closely with all governing bodies because that's my job description. It works with all school principals. That's my responsibility as well. So we try to share these ideas, to shape, even the product that we have on the BELA Act has been thoroughly consulted with all those various stakeholders. And what we have done to date is that I think I have trained all provincial education officials on the content of the BELA Act so that they can share this information reliably, correctly, with responsibility. Now, having to educate officials who I expect that by February, they'll go to SGBs, they'll go to principals, they'll go to teachers. By March, we must have dealt with all this misunderstanding of the BELA Act. That is what we're doing. And we're meeting various stakeholders. We're getting invited right and left just to solve it. I think our biggest enemy when it comes to having to disperse this message it's social media. And even formal media itself, because we want to believe it's run and managed somewhere else. That at this stage is no longer a matter of understanding the Act itself. It's a matter of distorting the information so that it suits whoever has an agenda on the Act. I mean, as we're sitting here, you have gone through a lot of videos, you have gone through social media that were telling you that this act will bring about abortion in schools. Children of as young as 12 years are going to be exposed to this. The powers of the SGBs are going to be... You have gone through all those things, but if you read the act today, you'll realize that none of those things are there in the act itself. So it is the social media that you need to get into that space and just make people, would you please read and don't rely on TikTok for things that you hear. And that is the issue that you need to deal with.
Sure. So Mr. Ndebe, I want to argue that maybe let's rely on TikTok. Let's use this very same TikTok. Let's use this very same Instagram, this very same X, to get the right message across. I'm going to pick on you, Ntando. I don't know how many followers Ntando has, but she has lots of followers. And she is an education activist. She's a leader in the education space. We need to rope in people like yourselves to assist us in countering this narrative that is on social media that is distorting what the Act actually seeks to achieve. And I hope that many of us in this room, whatever organizations we come from, we will use those platforms that we have to support the department, to support this country in ensuring that this progressive act lands in the manner in which it should across the board. I'd like to then move to Advocate Merabe. Advocate, you've been part of the entire process. You were in the task team. I'd like to first, because the issue of distortion also links to participation. What are your thoughts on our public participation as a country? Were we present when you called on us to give our inputs as a country? Did we come forth? Those of us most affected by what the Act seeks to address, did we come to the halls? Did we write to Parliament? Were we participating as a public? And then we'll get into the other questions.
Is the mic working? Okay. Yeah, I think thanks for the opportunity. I was once faced with this question in one of the academic conferences that I attended recently about the public participation. And remember very well one of the speakers there who is a former member of Parliament was vehemently opposed to the BELA Act. And one of the issues that she raised was that there was no a proper public participation. But let me tell you something, because we started to draft this. I know that's going to be the next question. Let me say fast forward. I looked at the parliamentary debates in Parliament, to track down the issue of public participation. I think I also attended the last portfolio committee meeting online, to okay the bill at that stage. And what I can say, according to me, and taking into account that, the Department of Basic Education, I keep contacts with the DBE. Those are my clients because I'm in private practice now. And I was aware that they made a lot of, public hearings countrywide. And I equated that to, a bill with regard to the expropriation of land. And then there was a lot of public hearings. I've never seen, I think that was the first act, expropriation of land. And the second one was the BELA Act. Huh? Yes, and the third one is the BELA Act. And in my opinion, because I was following those engagements, I strongly am of the opinion that there was a meaningful engagement with the public. Taking into account that we had the first bill which was published 2017, and then it was vehemently opposed. And then, and I'm going to be brutal, but in a very respectful manner to, you know, our political heads here, to say that, in my opinion, you cannot postpone transformation. You can't postpone transformation when the Constitution is very clear. Just to make an example, we know this is a constitutional court just around the corner here. And in one of the first cases, or one of the second cases that came to this constitutional court, which is the apex court, where we've got the top legal brains in the country. In one of the cases, which is the case of Ermelo, the constitutional court, Deputy Chief Justice Musaneke, said, when you look at the constitution of this country, the constitution in an unconcealed design, and I quote, the constitution ardently demands that the social uneveness be addressed by a radical transformation of a society as a whole and of a public education in particular. So if you've got a bill which has been there 2017, only became an act now recently, not yet even in operation, do we, you know, as the parliament and the cabinet, live to what the Constitution is saying? And the Constitution says radical transformation of a public education in particular. And on number of court cases that came before you, at some stage I had an opportunity, MEC, I will confess, I was one of the council that was appointed to challenge the admission regulations in this province here at the Constitutional Court. And my client lost. If a client has lost, it is the client who has lost the case. It's not me. And the Constitutional Court emphasized that, to say there's a need, there's a pressing need for radical transformation of basic education. Not the Constitutional Court, other lower courts like Supreme Court of Appeal. And I put this as a challenge, to say if the courts, the judges tell you, the top legal brains in the country, the apex court, to say there's a need for radical transformation of public education in particular. And we take about 10 years to come up with this piece of legislation. Really is an indictment in this country. We've got the National Development Plan 2030, the action plan and so on, Minister. We've got ideals, we've got a vision to say beyond 2030, when we go out, we must see a new South Africa that we voted for in 1994. A better life for all. How are we going to achieve that beyond the 2030? Is a challenge, yes. Let me not digress so that I can get another question and answer it.
Thank you, Advocate Merave. I am hoping that the conversation that we also want to have with you in terms of just key highlights of drafting the Act and some of the legal implications on it, I'm hoping someone from the floor may touch on it so that we can get to that one. But I want to open to the floor, and I really want to appreciate the insights that have come from our panel thus far. I mean, Prof. Mary reminding us of the emotional element of what we're doing in terms of transformation. Wabundlebe has explained to us or clarified for us some of the areas where we are a bit concerned, and we're really calling on support in terms of disseminating the truth of what the Act is. Dr. David also explained to us what they support as SATU and where their areas of concern are. And an advocate says to us, we cannot postpone transformation, which links directly to what Prima Lesufi says when he says sometimes to be progressive, you may come across as being irresponsible. And the question now is how do we respond to that? Deputy Minister Mhaule, when me and my friends in 2015 went and protested, and then in 2016 we said no single student must pay registration fees. Hey, we didn't know what we were calling for. Because the following year, we said no single student must be barred from accessing the institution because of registration fees. And so, as long as you qualified, you could register. But going to university or a TVET is not just registration fees. It's the books, it's the bed, it's the food, it's the transport, it's the everything. We went through growing pains so that today over 1 million young South African students go to university for free. They do not pay for that bed, for that transport, for that book, for that laptop. They don't pay those fees. But those were difficult years. 2016, 17, 18, those were difficult years. And so we are most likely to go into difficult years, going into 2025, 26, and so forth. And what we need to commit to as the people in this room is to hold one another and support one another to get through those growing pains of this progressive act. I'd like to note hands on this side and hands on that side. Nozipo, as I note the hands, please share with us the two questions from the online platform. So I'm noting the lady with the red top. I'm going to skip you for now, my gentleman who opened the session for us. The lady with the brown or beige shirt, and the lady at the back there. So I've noted 3. Okay, I'll come back to this comrade here. She has lots of access to lots of platforms where she can ask these questions. So I'll come back to her now. And the gentleman with the cap. So I've noted 4 on this side. The lady right here in front with the maroon. The gentleman with the black. And I think the lady at the back with the white. And the lady at the back with the red. Those are the hands we're taking for now. Those are a lot of hands. Those are 8 hands. So I do kindly implore on yourselves and plead with yourselves, we be considerate that we all get our chance. So I'm limiting each question or comment to 1 minute. Sis Nozipo, please show us or share with us what is on the online platform.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We've got a lot of positive comments that we are not going to read. The responses that were given by Mr. Ndlebe about grade R, that is appreciated. And then we've got only one question from a teacher who is asking, get this. She is asking whether we are ready, especially the grade R practitioners, we are ready with the training of the practitioners so that they can be able to actually take the task. But they're very excited that now there is an act that is saying grade R is compulsory and that is positive. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. We'll start with the lady with the red top and then the lady with the beige shirt. Oh, boom. Was she raising, did you raise your hand on her behalf?
Oh,
yes, there we go. Bring it to clap and share the platform.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Advocate, for the input about BELA Act. But my question is simple and to the point, that is BELA Act only limited to language, policy, admission, and the grade R? The reason why I'm asking this, you have charged that you cannot postpone transformation. My question is, when are you going to phase out certain areas on the curriculum. To be specific, history, for instance. The first speaker has elaborated on the importance of the place in which we are in today, because it holds a history like South Africa. But our children currently, they are learning about certain things which do not benefit them. Just like history, they still learn about Hitler. I'm worried about that. And then, number 2, there are also other subjects, grade 8 and 9, technology, art and culture. Those subjects do not proceed to FET grade 10. But sometimes learners, when they fail those subjects, they're not allowed to proceed. So how can you close a progress for a subject which does not benefit them? So my question, I want to know, when are you going to touch base on the curriculum specifically and phase out or transform certain areas of curriculum which are not appropriate for our children? Because nowadays our children, they must learn in the way in which they want to learn, not in the way in which we want to teach them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's on curriculum. Chief Director will take that. And then maybe just the key focuses on certain clauses as opposed to the whole act.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to also thank MEC Wetu no Umama Deputy Minister. And thank you very much also to the panel. I am worried, Mr. Ntlebe, that my granddaughter is going to start grade R. But I heard at the starting of the whole issue of the BELA Act, we were told that it's going to take place at school. And now I hear you touching that the ECDs will also participate. But now how are we going to be sure to say, I am going to register my child at the ECD? How are we going to be sure that what they are going to get at the ECD is the same as what the school is going to offer? That's my worry. I also wanted to touch on the history thing, but my colleague here has already said something about it. But with me is, I know that when the learner has to take history, there's a reason why they choose Hitler or whatever, maybe the package or the way in which he was, that can give something to the learner. But now my worry is, why at this juncture, we even now are moving forward positively with BELA Act. Why are we still having those Hitler people, those white people from overseas? Instead of, because we do have leaders, very good leaders, in Africa, for example. Why can't we use them? And then put aside the Hitler gang and whatever, and not ignore them, because there might be the aha in what they were doing that our leaders didn't do. But I still feel we can get a lot similar to the ones that we are already having. It's very shocking that our children, my child now at the high school, is still doing history with those people.
All right, thank you very much for that one. Curriculum again, ECD and phasing out of certain subjects.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. May I say, I'm sure we all support grade R here, but I've got a number of concerns as this debate is going on. Our MEC has spoken of 5 basics that we need in our schools. My question is, why don't we have these basics, or why have we not cracked them for our township schools? And everyone is talking of transformation. Does transformation mean taking township children to Afrikaner schools or the schools that are away from home? What kind of townships will we have with no schools? Because it seems the fight with the BELA is forcing our children into Afrikaner schools, as if teachers in townships are not competent enough to do the job. Does better life mean transporting our children at 4 a.m. to suburban schools? Why, after 30 years, have we not been able to transform our township schools into schools of choice where even Afrikaner children want to go? The lady in the Duke said she wanted to be taught in her African language. Why after 20 years don't we have an African language in each and every former model still school? We have kept it, we have been in power. Those things should have changed. And now the Afrikaners are where we all wish to be as a country, with a developed language. Instead of developing all the other 11 languages, we are busy wanting to destroy and dismantle this one. And I'm saying this as an activist, as a student activist. I've been there, done that. We have to challenge ourselves and be accountable, more accountable.
Thank you so much for that one, just highlighting how the skewedness of our conversation around transformation. The gentleman with the cap, there's the last hand this side, the gentleman with the cap. That's our last hand that side, that's our fourth hand.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mpo, a BEd student from the University of Johannesburg. My colleague here has said a lot that I wanted to say, right? And I'm also concerned that throughout the whole day, I get a sense that the BELA Act is actually all about taking our black learners from the township schools to the white schools in the suburbs, only in the name of de-racializing and transformation. But now, as a young...
Mpo is protected. Mpo is absolutely protected. He is going to be allowed to raise his concerns, and there's a panel here that's going to respond to Mpo's concerns.
Okay, thank you. And as a young teacher, I'm also concerned that what is happening in our township schools actually is being undermined, in a sense that we don't actually talk about the real issues that are happening in our township schools, like for instance the overcrowding of learners. And the reason why there's an overcrowding is mainly because also we have learners who are not mainly made for the mainstream school, but we are overlooking that only in the name of they have to be there, they have a right to this education. And lastly, the issue of language, that how do you then expect one teacher to stand in a classroom where there's learners who speak more than 5 languages? How is it going to be possible for me as a teacher who is only limited to 3 languages to teach learners who speak Tsonga, Chivenda, Xhosa, when I only speak Sesotho and English? Thank you.
Got you. Thank you, Mpo. All right, issues around capacity. I think a lot of questions are coming this side. The 4 hands on this side. Yes, the first one is right here.
Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Bui Majola. I'm the president of Association, Africa Education Governors Association, SA. Greetings to the leadership present.
All right, we're just trying to figure out what's making it hard for us to hear each other, if it's the fans or if it's us speaking. Maybe we can just I know it's hot, so let's just make sure we put the fan on and off at different times. May continue.
Okay, I'll try my Stuart voice. Okay. Mandibulele elithuba. Ndiyacinga into yoba xa ndithethayo akho ngxaki. IBELA Act ifika exesheni apho bendicinga uba fanuba uMzantsi Afrika uyafa when it comes to abantwana bethu. So xa ndime apha, let me start by saying I support IBELA Act. As a mother, as a grandmother, as an activist, as a political leader, nako konke nje engiyikho. Okufika kunginike inkinga nompendulo. Awuzifumani impendulo xa unemibuzo. While you are saying public is being taken into the confidence of those that are actually coming with something very good. The public is left far away. Reasons being, communication is only designated to the few, and the few that portray to understand what the public needs. I have learned to understand that people that portray representation of the broader public know far less about the needs of the public. In actual fact, Ndithetha nje mna, I'm raised from Eastern Cape, my former MEC. I'm happy that I served under her, but I was still very young and beautiful at the time. MEC Metcalf. It was not fashionable at the time to have many associations of governing bodies. For Department of Education to make sense of BELA Act, let us agree to depoliticize education. Politics are actually not servicing us right within education. By virtue of BELA Act not being supported by the former ruling party in Parliament, I was actually very angry, because there are some people that were supposed to understand what BELA Act was meant to achieve. But it was supported somewhere else. I'm not saying that today, but I'm just saying, if we can have that type of a situation, what does that mean to a person that is in KZN, deeper KZN, deeper Limpopo, deeper Eastern Cape? It is not about people not wanting transformation. It's about people not understanding what does this mean. Because I think Sibengamabanjwa for the longest time, not by apartheid, but ourselves, we have teachers that don't want to transform. I remember under the late Dr. Kaiser Dalunga Matanzima in the Eastern Cape, a teacher knew his or her role in school. It's exactly what BELA Act is actually enforcing today. To say differentiate between who you are on the street and who you are in the classroom. And I applaud BELA Act for that. And it's saying there's going to be consequent management. But now the question is, in terms of the provinces, are we going to see that? Because we have seen teachers falling off the professional scope, doing things that are unthinkable inside the schools, in the name of being taught, and they're getting paid, so they don't worry what comes of a child. Now my question is now, as a governor, to the deputy minister, what powers are you giving the associations of governing bodies, which is your core stakeholder within your department, to monitor that this BELA Act is seen to be practical, effective, and in actual fact is doing what is meant to do, to serve not only a black child. That's what I like about the BELA Act. It is not about the black child. It is about children in totality. Because children that are born today, they don't know about black and white. I have a granddaughter. She asked me a question. I'm going to ask the question to the deputy minister today. How much black must you be black for you to be important in South Africa? The reason why she was asking that, everybody that is talking about transformation is talking about the transformation of a black mind into some space somewhere else. We don't need to be transformed. We're okay. But the fact of the matter is, bring the language to us. Right now we're talking English. There are very few English-speaking people here. Why aren't we trying to understand our languages? It's because we're so consumed about this dominating language. It's not funny. And as we are transiting into... thank you. Okay, as I conclude, this is the request that I have again. We have entered a digital space. Gauteng province actually presided over other provinces by introducing tablets and whatever mobility in terms of the digital space. But I don't know what made them retract that. Because right now, for you to communicate, let's not TikTok when you don't have a tablet. Let's not talk TikTok when you don't have a laptop and airtime and Wi-Fi. I thank you.
Ngoska cool. All right, our last three speakers, please do not bully me. Like, no, it was just to Mama. There were 3 hands there at the back. Kanganuk notil? Nota Wena, yes, my brother, the one who's standing.
Yeah,
Someone is trying to hijack me here.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm going to mix English in the Sepedi. Yeah, for the ease of the context of this particular gathering. You know, Nompendulo, Ubabu Karl Marx saw this thing long before what we met in South Africa beyond 1994. In his thesis, he's talking about historical and dialectical materialism. And in a dialectical materialism, he's talking about contending forces, 2 contending forces, actually. Now, in the South African context, we are talking about minority and majority. And if you look into South African constitution, you can tell what was the submission in the constitution of minority and what was the submission of my majority. Now, why one is saying that? Long after constitution, we are still talking about white people fearing something in our system. What is that they are fearing? Maybe Professor will really highlight. Sorry? So maybe Professor will highlight that. Or,
bring the mic a bit closer, please, so that the people who are online can also hear you.
Maybe Professor will highlight that. What is that others are fearing? Because really, from 1994 until now, we know one another. We know how the black people can run this country, let alone these other ills which are raised on a daily basis. But you know, you don't fear us. You are with me here, you don't fear me. I can be with you for 24 hours, and you will not fear anything. Why, when we enter education institution, then we begin to fear one another? And really, to me, like one of the panelists has indicated, that this is only about the racial supremacy and nothing else. Really, others are used to dominate. You know, I've been following laws in the Department of Education. You know, I was very shocked that the interpretation of the courts, because of the submission of minority at that particular level to generate case laws, there are certain words which are entrenched in our constitution where now the minority are now manipulating those words. Nompendulo, did you know that the right to equality means something else to a black person and it means something else to a white person? In terms of the black context and understanding of equality right, we thought that right was meant for us to be the same and equal. But to white people, it talks, the equality means to the closeness or proximity to resources. And really, that shocked us. And then now, because they've thrown the javelin during the development of our constitution, wherein they knew they were dominating the judiciary, and also they dominated the submission in the constitution because they had the experience of governing then. They make sure that there are salient elements in the constitution which they are going to use as a javelin. When we question them, they are going to meet those concepts at the end. And really, that is what the argument now is all about. We believe this BELA Act is very correct to transform this particular society social. We cannot be delayed. Actually, this debate was supposed to be in 1995. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. for that comment. Our last two on this side.
Thank you very much, Nompumelelo. My name is Francina Tsoku. I am the Treasurer General of the National Association of School Governing Bodies. All protocol from the DM is recognized. The BELA Act is saying to us, education remains a societal matter. And that is why the Act is giving back every person the responsibility that each party should play. As parents, we've got the sole responsibility of making sure our kids are in school. That is why the BELA Act is saying compulsory education remains critical issue that as parents we must attend. But secondly, it's saying to us as school governing bodies, you also need to make sure you govern, and you govern with accountability, so that the monies, whether it's through the infrastructure, in the school or any section of the money, you are able to account to the parents that have nominated you, because it is very important to have a society that can hold itself accountable, so that the transformative agenda that we always speak of, it is realized very soon. The issue that I was listening attentively and read in the BELA bill was to say we also need to change the policies. Remember, as governors, the policies are our sole responsibility in schools. The admission policy, the religious policy, the language policy, we need to make sure we are changing them. But how are we able to change them? And I'm making the plea to the Department of Education to say they should prioritize to give us, the stakeholders, all of us, whether it's unions, whether it's school governing body associations, advocacy programs that will make sure when we go to our constituencies, we are able to speak exactly what the BELA bill is saying, so that we are able to have the uniform implementation of the BELA bill in our country. We are not going to sit here and discuss the bruised egos of some races or what. We are not even going to entertain that. As black people or as people of South Africa, in the realization of the rainbow nation, we will make sure that the BELA bill is implemented. That is why some of us, we attended those public hearings, so that we were able to make the input on behalf of the organizations that we represented. The issue of being having a dominant race is not going to assist us as a country. We are 30 years beyond in the democracy that we can entertain the ego of some people. What I would also love to implore to the Department of Education is that they should be able to close the gap between the grade R practitioners who are in the ECDs and the grade R teachers that are in schools, so that we have the uniformity in terms of implementation of the curriculum. Because as the SGBs, we want our learners, whether in the home-based ECDs or in schools, to be taught the same agenda or the same content. And the other thing that the department must start doing, DM, is to make sure you revise the norms and standards for school funding, so that it includes the grade R and all other advocacy programs, so that come 2025, we are able to hit the ground running in preparation for the 2026 for smoother implementation. And lastly, I will propose that maybe in the meantime, we don't have people that are responsible for the BELA bill. We are able to use the QLTC coordinators to coordinate in different provinces, so that we are able to reach the result that we all envisage it. We are here, all of us, to say we will go out there as stakeholders in education to demystify the myth around the BELA bill. BELA bill have our support, and we'll make sure we advocate for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that is our second last hand. That is our last hand from this side, and we'll immediately move into responses from our panel.
Okay, thank you so much, facilitator. I'm Teresa Ngobese from a civil society. Thank you so much for this thought-provoking platform. It's certainly helpful. I have one concern. From all the speakers, there is an age cohort that is not mentioned. That is the age cohort birth to 4 years, which I believe they belong to early childhood development. And we all say here, leave no child behind. But the children from birth to 4, they are out of this equation. So I still realize a shortcoming within the BELA Act. And thank you so much to Mr. Ndlebe, because most of my questions I had previously, you mentioned them in terms of the Strategy 2030 model of approach and availing access to all the children without discrimination. You also touched the thing on funding, but my main concern, it begins at birth, the first 1,000 days. What about those children? They are nowhere to be mentioned. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for those questions. What I really appreciate, Prof. Mary and Mr. Ndlebe, Advocate Merabe, Dr. David, is that colleagues in the room have not only posed questions, have not only commented, but they've also provided recommendations that I really think we can take forth as we implement the BELA Act. There were a lot of questions around the curriculum and concerns around the curriculum. I think I'll throw them this side. I'll come back to you, Advocate Merabe, if there's any other matters you'd like to clarify on the process as well. And I'd like to pose maybe to colleagues here the question around a lingua franca and how that can maybe, there's a lot of questions around, but how are we going to technically do it? You know, could that help us? Could we ever get to a point where we are like Kenya, where we do have our smaller other languages, but there's this one that we all speak, like Swahili? I don't want to already start saying isiZulu. Hey, amapedi ang. Because that's another difficult conversation. You know, which one will we choose? Are we going to say numbers only? Prof, you've already said it's not only about the logistics, it's not only a technical conversation, it's an emotional conversation. So I think you heard what the colleagues had to say. I think we can find a way of just merging some of the comments and questions together, and then it will bring us to our end where we will then have closing remarks. In fact, let me just bully you. As you respond, please make your closing remarks, and we'll end this side with Dr. David.
Yeah, this is a very rich conversation, and I really am learning, and I have tried to cluster, so I'm not going to go question by question. There's two big themes for me. The first theme is implementation. The second theme is the question of social change. So I'm going to answer within that. So in terms of implementation, I'm going to say on this platform that we all owe a great vote of thanks to James Ndlebe, because he was in the trenches in Parliament all the way through, and you did a great job. Must say that. Now, the implementation question, now that we have BELA, now that we have policies, now that we have any legislation, is how do we turn the intentions and the hopes and the dreams into practical steps? How do we make it practical in the lives of teachers and children? And that's where I think James was particularly good, because he was explaining technically everything that needs to happen. Not everything, but at a high level. Now, what does that mean for why we don't have African languages in all our schools, in white schools as well? What does it mean in terms of how we deal with historic issues of black schools and white schools? We have black schools on the whole in townships, but there's very few white schools that are white schools. And we know why that is we've got the changes in demographic patterns that the MEC explained, and we've got this issue of schools of choice. And that is hard. Why have we not made our township schools the schools of choice? What do we need to understand in terms of implementation where we could do better? Let me move on to the next theme. The next theme is the issue of social change. So James, I think, was also, he put a little light bulb on in my head. I think especially those of us who struggled all of those years ago to be in Parliament, to create laws, may have had a naive understanding that when you've got a law, you've got change. When you've got a law, there's the implementation issues, but there's also the social change issues. I know that BELA, there was so much misinformation. I don't know why, if it was because it was the era of elections, but I got the same WhatsApps. Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Now that it's law, the officials of government have a responsibility to implement it, but also have a responsibility to understand the social change elements. And we need advocacy, where we listen, we understand, we resist the temptation of getting impatient and saying, I have the power, you will do, to keep advocating so that we take people with us. That means circuit managers and IDSOs in Gauteng. They've only got, IDSOs only have 5 schools or something, yeah? You need to be engaged with the school governing bodies as well as using the organizations. We need to be persuading all the points of power and influence of what needs to be done. If we don't do that, we forget the law doesn't change everything. It's the public understanding and support. So rather than a kind of triumphalism where we say, we won this law, you will now do what we say. We see it as an ongoing task of building. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Mary. Thank
you very much. Let's put this act into perspective. We're not having 2 laws called the South African Schools Act, and there's another law that's called the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act. We're talking about one law. What we have done was to take the South African Schools Act and look at issues that are preventing us from getting access, from dealing with transformation, from making SGB functional, and took the court's judgment and then started putting them around the South African Schools Act. So when this BELA Act is signed and is completely implemented, you're going to have one law. Clause number 1 in SASA, has it changed? If it hasn't, you'll find it as it is. 2, no change. When you go to clause 4, it will then say this clause is amended by, then you get something new. And it goes on like that. So you're going to read the new SASA from page 1 up to the last, and that is your law. So there's nothing like we're dealing with something different. Now, what was SASA all about? SASA is about management, it's about governance of schools. So when you amend, you're only amending certain sections that were problematic to the country. You don't take other laws all over the place and put them in SASA. For example, you don't take curriculum issues and put them in SASA because SASA never dealt with curriculum. Curriculum always dealt with CAPS. So when you want to talk about history, You want to talk about 3-stream model? You want to introduce other languages? Don't go to SASA. You won't find them there because SASA is about administration and governance. I think DM has indicated as we speak in the emperors, they're talking language. There are teams that are talking about history, how it needs to be modified so that it becomes relevant. Don't look for those things in SASA. You'll never find them. And you won't find them in the Act. Don't say the Act doesn't respond to a whole lot of ills of government, because you're going to look for pit latrines there. You're going to look for mobile classrooms. Hence, you're bringing in overcrowding in there. You're not going to find those because there are norms and standards of infrastructure. It's another law. So we're not mixing many laws together into one. You talk of exclusion and you bring in learners with special needs, you won't find them in the Act because there is white paper 6 that deals with that. There is a document that deals with what do you call these schools that are mixed? Not twinning, where you have a combination of children with learning disability together with self-service schools. So you're not going to get those things there. What are you getting? You're getting management and administrative improvement processes. That's it. Now, when you deal with overcrowding in schools, it's not because there's no law that deals with overcrowding. There is a law that says the class must have 40 children with 1 teacher. But when schools become overcrowded, there are 2 reasons why they become overcrowded. One is that they are deliberately overcrowded, which means the management team itself decides to over-enroll. How do you answer to a question that this school is overcrowded, the school within 500 meters is empty? It means the overcrowding is deliberate. If schools are going to be empty and others are overcrowded, and the empty ones are empty because they are gatekeeping, they are refusing to admit learners to fill up the empty space. That is where the BELA Act comes in and say the head of department has a say in ensuring that it happens. When you talk about languages, there's a question that says, why do we have schools that have particular languages now in 2024? The answer is that the law allowed those schools to do that then. And that is the reason why we have a BELA Act, to take away those powers to determine a single language. The BELA Act now says the head of department has the authority to instruct a school to introduce additional languages, but following particular processes, so that you don't have these single medium schools and so on. When you say in your classroom you have 5 different languages there, you have to teach these children in different languages, I don't understand, because you are not allowed to teach a Xitsonga child Xitsonga if you are not a qualified Xitsonga teacher. You teach languages because you are qualified. But in the same classroom, when you deal with teaching and explaining concepts that are difficult, you are allowed to multitask and code switch so that the children can understand in the languages that they are. Some of us are privileged. I always say that. I went to a school that has 8 languages, 1 high school, 8 languages. And we'll all go to maths and be taught maths. When the bell rings, we'll all go and do our own languages, 8 of them in 1 school. Probably that's why I speak all languages in South Africa, because of that type of a thing. And that's what the BELA bill is trying to say. It can't be correct that a school in KZN will only do English and Afrikaans. It can't be correct that a school in the Free State will not have Sesotho inside that school. And that's what the BELA Act is trying to indicate. As GB Association, you don't need our permission to play your oversight role. You don't have to get a letter from us that play an oversight role. Anything that goes wrong into schools, that's your problem. And that's you who must raise it, and that's you who must help us deal with it. The norms and standards, Francina, don't need to change to include grade R. the Act is introducing grade R so that those fundings and the post-establishment are then catered into that. So there's no need for that. We just have to implement the Act as it is. My biggest problem, which is also coming up in this meeting, is that is the BELA Act about the language and admission only? Hey, they are all these items of that. And I always ask a question, who decided on those things? Until parents understand who decide how much the school fees is, the better. And read the Act, it will tell you that you are responsible for those things. You need to know where each cent is going before you even approve how much the school fees is going to be. And in that way, we will implement the Act in a very simple and straightforward way without complicating it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ndlebe. I think the matter around SGBs is very close to the one on public participation. And MEC Chilwane, we used to complain at Pretoria Girls High. I'm an old girl. And we used to complain and we used to say, yeah, you pass all these things. Our parents can't be here because our parents are middle class. And so they are, in fact, they were at the, middle class is a spectrum. They are, to peeper through. They are in debt half the time at those schools. And we used to complain and say our parents cannot be there because they are busy working. But I also, with that understanding as a child, we were 15, 16, and we were making those iterations. We need to find a way for our parents to be involved. We can no longer pardon our parents from not being involved because, oh, mama, on a Saturday, she'll find a way to make it to all the commitments that we commit ourselves to on Saturdays and Sundays. And it's high time, unfortunately, that our parents take the responsibility of also being involved in SGBs. It is unfair to then blame an SGB for taking a particular decision where there were people like yourselves who could commit themselves and you had to be decisive. Others will question why government or parliament had to be decisive in the manner in which they had to be decisive in, but you say, advocate, that transformation or the revolution cannot be put on hold. We cannot delay it. So if certain decisions have to be made, and at that point in time, those of us who have gathered here felt that was the best decision for us to make, then we must move. And if we were incorrect, then we'll find a way of realigning one another. But we do have to hold ourselves to account as citizens and be involved in this democracy. We cannot wait for local government elections. We cannot wait for national elections and hope that Umam Regina, Nosiviwek, Bazo over 5 years make miracles happen. You need to be involved in every single step of the way. It can't be that now we are asking, what is this act saying? When Parliament did go out there, they did. As a former member of Parliament, I'm well aware of the many hearings that were held. Many of us young people, I don't know, but many of us young people voluntarily follow Beyonce, voluntarily follow Kabza the Small. How many of us voluntarily follow Parliament's social media pages? How many of us voluntarily follow Deputy Minister and MEC Chilwane's social media pages? Because it is through that initiative of keeping yourself informed that you will know what is happening in the country. A small concert. But advocate, please do make your reflections on anything that was shared from the floor.
I think I'm audible. Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to add on what Ndlebe said, to say the BELA Act deals with a number of issues. It is not only those issues that the other speaker has alluded to. But what I want to venture into is the issue of the mother tongue teaching. I'm a proponent of a mother tongue teaching because we also talk about the SGB's language policy making functions, the admission of learners at schools. And one of the speakers there said, you are talking about transformation. Does this transformation mean that we must take our children to the suburbs? According to me, that is not transformation. According to me, is that a learner in Tembisa must get a quality and similar education like the learner at Rivonia. And there is no equality because like justice, equality delayed in education is equality denied. So it also comes into picture to say, what do we do? And I liked the other speaker there indicating that education is a societal issue. And I'm saying this on the basis of what I've observed about those who are opposed to BELA Act. And I like what they are doing. Those who are opposed to BELA Act, if they feel that the education of their children is threatened, either through the issue of the language or the admission at public schools, they rise up. But I'm going to put a challenge to us as the Africans. We are now in 30 years in democracy. I haven't yet of any case where an African parent went to court, I think it's only one, to say, I claim a right on behalf of my child to be taught in a mother tongue. And I liked what the MEC said about the Africans. I respect all the 12 official languages. I don't have a problem with Afrikaans. And the MEC was spot on to say, he is Aletaleg. I can also speak Afrikaans. I can also speak other African languages. And when I was also doing my research about the introduction of African languages at our public schools, particularly black schools, what crops up predominantly there is that black parents do not want their children to be taught in a mother tongue. We must face that challenge. We must face the truth. You know, I used to work with the politicians. One of my MECs when I was still in government, when people were saying, I want my children to be taught to that particular school that is teaching learners in Afrikaans. And he would say, are you jealous about how the Afrikaners have developed their language? We must be brutal to ourselves. We must speak the truth. 30 years down the line. And let me, even quote, what the Constitutional Court, you see, here's the Constitutional Court. Even the judges here, you know what they said? They said, learners whose mother tongue is not English, but rather one of our indigenous languages, together with their parents, have made a choice to be taught in a language other than their mother tongue. This occurs even though it is well settled that especially in the early years of formal teaching, mother tongue instruction is the foremost and the most effective medium of imparting education. And the judges here, they said, ample literature indicates that in Africa, the former colonial languages have become the dominant medium of teaching. And that is exactly even in 30 years' time. I normally make an example about the Afrikaners, how they developed their language. Immediately after the Anglo-Boer War, it was as a result of the language tension, the Tal Strait. But what they did, the Afrikaners, to develop Africans. And my challenge to you is that we must develop the African languages. We mustn't talk about the other languages. Forget about the other people's language. What about your language? Why are you not insisting that your child must be taught in a mother tongue? Why? It's 30 years down the line. The Constitution says so. The judges here, they tell you that. And they go on to say, language of, they say, they describe this to say, this is described as language of instruction conundrum in Africa. It's a conundrum to the whole continent. But the Afrikaners, they developed Afrikaans. After that, they listened to their leaders. And one of their leaders at that time was President Steyn. And he told the Afrikaners after the Anglo-Boer War to say, you can't speak English. He told them in Afrikaans to say, die taal van die oorwinner en die mond van die oorwonne is die taal van 'n slaaf. Loosely translated, he told them to say, the language of the conqueror, like what I'm talking now, the language of the conqueror, in the mouth of the conquered, is the language of the slaves. You will not develop the education in this country. You will not develop the economy in this country if we don't make sure that our children get basic education in their mother tongue. To make an example, in other countries like China and so on, if you are doing your PhD, your thesis, it's in English, it must be translated in the language that is being spoken in your community there. If your thesis, your PhD thesis about mathematics, is about science, technology, and this, and then it must be translated in the language that is being spoken. And what's going to happen? People who write the textbooks, they've got PhD thesis, they compile the textbooks. And then children could be taught in their mother tongue. How many people do we have in this country who have got PhDs? Why are we not pushing that? Those PhD theses be translated in our African languages so that we can have textbooks to develop that. So that is the challenge. It is the challenge for us. That's why I'm saying, well, I'm a proponent of a mother tongue, but the challenge is the following. As the Africans, if my child speaks English with a nice accent at the former model school, I think that my child is receiving quality education, is smart. No. The Afrikaners said immediately after Steyn, Afrikaans was introduced in church, at universities, at schools, and so on. Then came another leader of the Afrikaners. He told the Afrikaners, as je leg op die taal, je leg op die mensen. You live to the language. You live to the language. You live to the men. So we need to lift our languages. And who has got that responsibility? It is not government. It is us. And my challenge is the following. Those who are opposed to BELA bill, if they feel that the education of their children is threatened, they rise up. Why can't we rise up for about 30 years? Let us rise up from today so that our children can get quality education. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Advocate Nohe. Thank you so much, Advocate Merabe, for that input. Our last panelist for his closing remarks, Dr. David.
Thank you very much once again, Chair. In my closing remarks, I just want to share the same sentiment with the guy over there. So he spoke about a fear of minority. Morena, these people, they do it intentionally. They postpone this transformation intentionally. Why? Because they want to preserve their identity, culture, and superiority. They do it intentionally because they are afraid of inclusivity, redress, equality, social cohesion, and social justice. So Nelson Mandela, he once said, I quote, "Our people have the right to hope, the right to a future, including the right to life itself. No power on this earth can destroy the thirst for women dignity. Our land cries out for peace, and we will only achieve it through adherence to democratic principles and respect for the rights for all. So these people, they don't want to see themselves equal to Africans. And in my closing, as a way forward, I request the Department of Education in their budget, they must make sure that they prioritize education, in particular grade R, so that we can be able to reskill those practitioners and to make sure also we have sufficient educators. We really also please
Please, can you please afford Dr. David his time?
We
to wrap
also
up, please?
plead with President to make sure that he no longer delay this clause 4 and 5. This is long overdue, so he must make sure that he implement these clauses with an immediate effect. Education is public good. With those words, thank you very much for listening. Thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you so much to Prof. Mary Metcalf, Dr. David Matsepe, Advocate Maisa Jeremiah Merabe, Mr. James Ndlebe. I'd like to believe that we have had a fruitful conversation. If there were questions that you had, I hope they've been clarified. It's not by mistake that there are a few clauses in the Act that seem to be dominating the conversation. Our history as a country dictates that there are those particular clauses on language, those particular clauses on access that will dominate discourse. And so it is our responsibility as a collective to move out of this room and ensure that other educators that are not here have a better understanding, because collectively in this room, we've all supported the Act. Most of the speakers who stood here, if I'm not mistaken, stood up and said, we support the Act and we support its intentions. And so it's important for us to take the Act back to communities, to take them with as we now implement the Act. Where we perhaps may have erred in not ensuring that everyone was part of the process, let us be leaders here today. Let us be the decisive leaders that Prof. Mary spoke about in ensuring that everyone knows what this bill is about. Those of us who are here, let us commit to ensuring that the misunderstandings in terms of dissemination of this information are clarified. Chief Director uthi TikTok inkinga, asenze TikTok ingabi inkinga, mayisebenzele manje TikTok. There is a call here that says to us, if we're complaining about language, let us be the ones to address why we cannot be taught in these languages when they are the dominant languages spoken in the country. Sikipa imali eziningi. The biggest budget in this country goes to education. The biggest budget in this country deliberately goes to education because education remains an apex priority of this government's pro-poor policies for us to eradicate inequality, poverty, and unemployment. And so this budget, with these progressive policies and laws and acts, must work for our benefit, and it is only through our inclusive collective efforts that we can make this happen. I thank you so much for listening attentively to our panel. Let's go out there and make the BELA Act an implementable act. Thank you so much.
panelists a warm round of applause. Thank you so much.
All right.
Dr. Nohe, are you going to be handing out those gifts? All right. So in fact, then it leads us into the next session. Mr. Lidimo, I'm going to invite you back on stage just to please help us thank our panelists for their contribution to the conversation. And I realized that Nompendulo is like a pastor. You know, she concludes and concludes and concludes.
Who was not here, so I was told to manage it until food arrives. So I think food has arrived.
Yes. All right, thank you so much to our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, we're running now slightly behind our schedule, but the good news is that there are only 2 items that remain on the program for today. The first one is to wrap up the session, and then there's going to be a signing of the pledge from some of the parties that are represented here. I'm going to invite the board chair of the MGSLG, the Matthew Goniwe Leadership Academy, to come on stage to give us a roundup of some of the key takeaways, and then we'll get into the session where pledges will be signed, and hopefully I'll be able to release you into lunch at that point.
Thank you very much, Kathy and Dr. Nohe. Let me acknowledge your brilliant manner in which you conducted the colloquium, and really thank you for having taken us this far. Let me acknowledge and thank the Deputy Minister, Regina Maule, who has made a valuable contribution to the colloquium. An apology on behalf of the Premier, who had indicated he will be part, but due to competing priorities could not make it. The MEC for Education, Sports, Arts and Culture in our province, Honorable Matume Chilwane, was also participated in this process. The moderator for the panelists, Nompendulo Mkacho, for having taken us through key issues related to the BELA Act and its implications, and all panelists in the form of Professor Metcalf, Mr. James Ntlebe, Advocate Mirabe, Dr. David Matsepe. We really do appreciate your having come here and made a valuable contribution to shaping the public discourse on this issue of the BELA Act. Let me also acknowledge the presence of trade unions here, school governing bodies, all education role players here, partners to Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance, and all attendees who have set aside all their other important commitments to be with us in this colloquium. We now know, having gathered here, the process that has unfolded, culminating into the BELA bill becoming an act of parliament. As far back as 2017, when it was published, it only culminated into an act in 2024. And we know that it was a delayed justice. We now know the progressive transformative intentions of the BELA Act as the colloquium gathered here, what it seeks to achieve vis-a-vis the counter-revolutionaries who want us to believe on other things. We know that
It is intended to pursue inclusivity, equity, and social justice. We know through our panelists that this is progressive. We also know that all of us in South Africa must observe the supremacy of the Constitution, that any other law which contradicts the Constitution is invalid. We now understand that this act seeks to bestow powers on the HOD as a representative of the state to ensure that education becomes accessible, that the rights of children are upheld, that education can be taught in the language of our children's choice. And we know that it is intended to take those provisions of the Constitution forward. And we have full confidence that it has passed the constitutional muster, that anyone who seeks to take this matter on any courts in our country, we have full confidence that that attack will collapse. We are agreeing as a colloquium that Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance and all stakeholders with whom we collaborate are converging in one voice here gathered, that transformation cannot be delayed. And therefore there's a need to send continuous loud voice to our Honorable President, that Comrade President, please sign sections 4 and 5 into law. It's long overdue. We have that collective understanding, and as we leave, we'll collaborate with all other formations with similar thinking to ensure that we make that particular submission and ensure that come the deadline, even the outstanding clauses have been signed into law. We invite all stakeholders to collaborate with us, because there was a clear message that we need to advocate for the BELA Act so that there's uniformity in understanding and in application, including enforcement. So Matthew Goniwe School of Leadership and Governance is ready to work with stakeholders in the sector to ensure that we run the advocacy and thorough training for all stakeholders to understand the intentions of the Act and also assist the Department of Education and ensure that we implement. It is time for execution and not time for debate. We have debated from 2017, it is 2024 now. We have no time for debate. We now have time. It is time for us to do the actual execution. We have come to the end of this colloquium in our collective assessment. It was a very successful and enriching colloquium, and thank you for having made the time to be part of this milestone that we are all celebrating as progressive people of South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Before we disperse, we have this small item that we have to deal with, is a very important one. We'll invite the speakers and the panelists and the chairperson of the board and the CEO just to sign the pledge. Yeah, to sign the pledge. And I've been instructed to read it so that you know exactly what we are signing for. We the people say yes to the implementation of the BELA Act for transformative change in education. And the date is the 21st of November, 2024. Please do the honors. The people, anyway, thank you. Let's give a round of applause for this very important part of the ceremony. And we've got another board that side, and for all the organizations that are present here, you can also take time to sign there. But once we've closed, if there's still some space here, feel free to add your signature on this one. We are trying to save time when we call just a few people for now. And also I've been made aware to say there's been request for a copy of the BELA Act. We promise as you have registered, you have captured your email addresses, will email you the BELA Act. Thank you. But you can still also download it if you are techno-savvy. It's there. You can download it.
Ladies and gentlemen, while you're all invited to come up and sign the pledge, we've come to the end of our program officially. This is where we're going to leave things for today. I want you all to give yourselves a warm round of applause. You have been absolutely fantastic. You stayed tuned in, you participated in the conversation, and certainly your contributions have been noted and are meaningful. Refreshments will be served outside. I see that for those of you that have not signed the register, please make sure you do before everything else is wrapped up. Have a lovely afternoon and goodbye.
Goodbye. I've been told there are goodie bags as well. You can, for just attending, you can collect a goodie bag. Drive safely home. Thank you. Bye.